Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome to TST Garage. I'm Bart. Today I'll be your host, walking you through the installation procedure for our latest part that we'll be launching. These are the captive chain adjusters with spool bosses made for the 2022 and up Honda Grom. This bike has become the holy grail of cool design projects lately, and we're continuing in that fashion, launching our new adjusters for this bike. Why do we have to redesign them from the previous generation? Well, little brief info here. The swing arm seems to be very much the same as the old generation Groms, but the window for adjustment is punched in a different location, and it requires a deeper cap and a couple different nuances that we had to capture with a new design. So we did just that. It wasn't as trivial as just going in and moving some surfaces around. We actually had to go in and redesign the whole system and also redesign all the tool paths for manufacturing it. If you've ever taken off the rear wheel, then you know why this piece of pit performance technology is indispensable on your bike. If you haven't yet, we're gonna spare you the black and white infomercial style footage showing you me all sweaty, cursing, punching this thing when you loosen the axle, you loosen all this stuff and everything just pukes out on you. We're gonna spare you. We're gonna wait till you go ahead and do it yourself and then come back and say, hey Bart, I could really use these parts. I bet that will happen at some point. If it hasn't happened already, we have many signups for this particular part when it launches, so get yours soon. And that's pretty much it for my spiel. I'm gonna jump on in there and have some fun wrenching. All right, let's talk about what we're doing here real quick and then we'll go to step one. We have our new adjusters here. They do replace the entire mechanism that goes inside the swing arm and adjusts the chain. We will be replacing the sheet metal stamped welded components inside and the little washer spacer that goes on the outside that works in conjunction with the internals to prevent extraneous forces being exerted on the swing arm during a bumpy ride. With our setup, all those components are not necessary. All the stresses are distributed among very broad surfaces inside the swing arm, so we don't even need the external washer here. All this stuff will come out. We will insert this in. This gets to you pre-built with this component, so we'll need to put in this hardware and also put on our choice of spools. What you see here is the TST Industries spool setup. We also offer these in a choice of different color womet-tech spools. Choice is yours. You make that choice before checking out while buying this set from us. All right, so let's talk about step one. We will have to remove the cap here on our TST Industries axle slider. If you don't have axle sliders on your bike, then just proceed to the next step, which will be to remove the axle. If you do have these, 15mm socket takes them off. It's fairly straightforward. I will do that on both sides. If you want to make the rest of the process very easy on yourself, make sure that you have the wheel spaced up at the level that it's at when just suspended. Once we drop the axle, it's going to have a tendency to want to come down or out. Keeping it in place is really how you make this easy. Okay, axle head side is a 14mm socket. The nut is a 19mm. Once the nut is off, obviously if you have the sliders, we'll take the cup off. If you don't, there's nothing else to take off except for this washer spacer. This works in conjunction with the internal parts to distribute the stresses. We will no longer need that, so that goes to the side. Push out the axle. Get the axle out. As you can see, these things are already sliding out. As soon as you take the axle out, these come out. Now imagine what it takes to put all this stuff back in. You need like 8 hands. Since humans are not like octopus, we have to rely on engineering new parts to make this simple. All right. washer spacer from the other side comes off, and now I'll keep this back, keep it on for simplicity's sake. It's ready to go back in. We're good to go. What I'm going to do is grab one of these and see more or less where we want to have the axle hole. Now, I like to adjust my chain properly after the insertion of these components. So what I'm going to do is keep it a little bit longer, making it a shorter wheelbase, giving our chain slack. I use a 5mm Allen in this adjustment screw to move this away from the end of the swing arm or towards. It's really nice because it's completely captive. It doesn't move around like this one does. So when this is locked in the swing arm, this hole is always in the same place that you left it before taking your axle out. All right. What I'm doing here is adjusting. There we go. That's a better way to do it. I'm adjusting my length from the end of the end cap here. I'm gonna get it pretty close to what the stock setup had, but I'm going to keep it just a little bit looser, a little bit longer, farther away from the end cap. All right. Obviously, the spool bus goes towards the outside. They are mirror image parts. I've already assembled the spool onto here. We'll just need to tighten it. These components fit in there pretty loosely, obviously, until you start engaging the cap. Now, we wanted a slight interference fit. Wait, I have to adjust this guy too. I only did one side so far. So again, loose on the internal parts, and then once we get to the cap extension that goes inside the swing arm, it's supposed to get a little bit snug. I usually use a rubber mallet, a pretty soft one, to tap this in. Once it bottoms out, I use a 6mm Allen, and I tighten down on the screw that will expand the entire component within the swing arm and lock it in place. Don't want to overstress this connection, just enough to expand it a little bit and lock it in place. Move on to the other side. All right, so this guy's still loose here. I will demonstrate it again. Adjuster goes in, has very little movement. And then we get these extensions from the end cap in. Technically, we could possibly get it all in there without a mallet, but a nice soft mallet will do the job really nicely. And I want to note here that you want to make sure that this gap between the swing arm and the cap actually closes completely. Expand the end cap. If you're a guy that needs torque specifications for the spools, I would recommend 18 foot-pounds. I'm just going to tighten these guys down. I pre-assembled them without tightening them. Now they are tight. And now we are ready for the axle to go back in. I'm going to get my axle through the adjuster. Make sure that my brake carrier lines up, and then my wheel and its spacer on the right side. Hop to the other side and just ensure that the alignment is there. And I've found that I need to loosen this up a little bit more. It's not actually where I need it to be. All right, my axle's all the way through. Now I just have to make sure that before I start doing anything else, I have the same adjustment on this side and the other side on this bike. These adjusters that come from the factory have these really broad punch lines. We decided to put more lines into our system. They are much better visible when there are no sliders on these axles, but these have become such an indispensable piece of hardware on these bikes, and they save a lot of the other components that, you know, even though they obscure the view a little bit, it's still doable. If you start by adjusting this side parallel with the other side, keeping a little bit of slack in the chain, then it's pretty easy. Six lines. All right. For my particular application, I'm gonna start with 7 lines. I'm gonna put my cup for the sliders back on, get my nut back on here. Alright, I'm gonna get this bottomed out, make sure the chain is still slack. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this a little bit more so that I engage all of the components and get them clamped together. But at this point, you do not want to tighten it too much, because we're going to have to go through the procedure of tightening the chain. I'm going to knock out my little block here that I used for suspending the tire up, the wheel up, and now we are pretty much good. Because I had my lines aligned on both sides, I know that I have the same distance for my wheelbase on both sides. Now, this is not a how to adjust your chain video. If you need tips on that, I would say go to your vehicle manual or look it up. This is how I'm going to do it for now. I'm demonstrating how to put our parts on. So now I've adjusted my chain to good, and I'm going to go ahead and torque down the axle. So 14 millimeter for the axle head side again, and now I'm going to use a torque wrench. All right, so I'm going to set my torque wrench here to 44 foot-pounds. I'm going to hold the axle on the other side. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to replace my caps on my sliders, and then reconfigure my stand here to have this portion up so I could capture our spools. I'll show you guys how it all works. All right, let's get this bike up. Boom, look at that. Now, because those spools are actually rigidly mounted to the swing arm, now when you put it up on a stand, this thing won't roll around back and forth and possibly slip off the stand. If you're using one of those peg stands that go under the swing arm, then you know this thing has a tendency to move back and forth, and it's just unsafe. So this is a big plus here. As you already witnessed before, the adjustment method is super easy and always keeps your axle in the same place, whether you removing the wheel or just doing some other kind of maintenance. It's a really nice pit performance product here. If you like what we've done here, check it out on tstindustries.com. We have a growing catalog of parts for this bike. We also have parts for many other bikes that you may have in your stable. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you'll find it appropriate to mash that subscribe button underneath. And that's pretty much it for me. Thanks. Ride safe. Later.